Today we talked to Ben Hubbard, CEO of Nexus PMG. Ben's highly credentialed in the field of infrastructure project delivery, having learned his craft with over a dozen years at Fluor. Ben's company now, Nexus PMG, is a major force in the market of digester biogas RNG. So enjoy this conversation with Ben. Let's hit on three project delivery techniques. So one would be lump sum design build, lump sum EPC. One would be design bid build, and your cost reimbursable thing. I guess we're calling that cost plus, right? Is that open
Yeah.
book cost plus?
Yeah. You typically have a cost plus. You have cost plus, you have guaranteed max, and you have lump sum fixed price turnkey. LNT, LSTK is usually the three that we see the most of. But the LSTK performance wrap is the one that all the funds are typically wanting to see because they feel like that's the most de-risked type of contract out there, right? From their perspective, if we can reduce the amount of performance, if we can push the performance risk onto the EPC and we can push the cost and schedule risk and put some serious, you got the carrot and sticks model when it comes to these types of things. And the structure that is preferred by the finance community these days and has been historically is the stick model, which is if you guys don't do this, this, and this, then there's a huge penalty, right? And penalties can often inspire poor behavior when rubber hits the road and things start to go off the tracks. And let's be honest, when we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars of capex for some of these incredibly complicated projects, it really doesn't take a whole lot to go off the tracks. And that's not uncommon, nor is it necessarily even bad. It is what it is. And it's just part of the dynamic of a complex construction project. And so does it really make sense to have a structure in place that really pushes for potential, negative, poor behavior because of negative consequences? And this is as much an exercise in human psychology on how people think about these types of contracts as it is the action, what's on a piece of paper.
I've heard the joke said more than once that, the minute an owner and an EPC sign a contract together, you're immediately in a relationship of tension because your motives aren't fully aligned, right? The owner wants better, faster, cheaper, and the EPC wants to protect their backside, de-risk it, and to enhance their margin opportunities, right? So that puts you immediately in conflict.
It's exactly right. And that adversarial, it's great usually for the first few months. You're doing engineering design, you're not really in the field significantly yet, and everybody's, kind of, patting each other on the back, got the contract done, we're in engineering. And then when it usually starts to get hard is around that 60% engineering, we're in the field, procurement's getting delayed, and you have a couple of issues and change orders start to show up. Why are, the first change order lobs across the fence? Why are you change ordering me? Is this fixed price? And it just slowly starts to get a little bit more serious. It gets a little bit more formal. Letters start to come across in PDF format as opposed to phone calls. And it's inevitable because of what you just described. Most of these structures outside of the cost plus format I'm trying to make as much money as possible and you are trying to save from spending on me as much money as possible. And you see this in, like, as simple as it is in the residential construction sector. Like, it's no different, right? It's not a me versus you, but it's I'm protecting me, you're protecting you. And that's a little bit different.
How about any other structures that are more friendly, if you will, right? More of a spirit of collaboration. Is that really the cost plus world where it's more open book and you can agree on a supplier together and pick whatever price? The contractor's got a fixed markup on that. That gets this whole investment tax credit and domestic content has that all very confused, right? Understanding, what exactly is imported versus US made. But the risk there is, can you get a guaranteed max price on an open book cost plus?
You doing an open book conversion process on a cost plus is very common, particularly in like more mature asset classes like the oil and gas industry has been doing cost plus for 50 years. And where you see that is, hey, let's get to 60% engineering design. Let's get more advanced into engineering. We're going to do everything open book, and then we're going to close the book and move to a fixed price at that point in time. And a lot of this comes down to for owner, developer slash EPC is what's the definition of maturity of your project at any point in time. And if you can say like, look, let's not force you to take cost, schedule, and performance risk until such time that we've all mutually agreed we've nailed down what that risk is a little bit better than we are today. Otherwise, that you risk mispricing that risk, you misunderstanding that risk, and you miss essentially appreciating the impacts of those risks. And so the cost plus model, whether it goes all the way through construction and commissioning or it turns into a fixed price conversion open book methodology at some point in time, is in my opinion a very positive way to do things, because it fosters collaboration from day one, as opposed to, potentially it's my bottom line versus your bottom line. And I think the market, the finance community has been the major driver for that not being the primary go-to EPC contract, especially in some of these low carbon infra asset classes that are more emerging. But I think when you actually get under the hood, you realize that it's actually less risky in many cases, because it's so critical that good project management, good communication drives performance. And if you think of it that way, then the cost plus model actually is the best contract structure, in my opinion.
So where that gets a little prickly is, okay, we agree upon your markup, and whatever the number is, you would agree on a number, but how does contingency go, right? Because that looks like a big old number on the spreadsheet. The owner asks you, Ben, what is this for? What does contingency do? How do we deploy it? How do we allocate it?
Yeah, a lot of times in these models, the owner owns the contingency, and that is a benefit for two reasons to the owner. One, the owner can control scope management. So if you have an EPC who's cost plus without some sort of complicated performance wrap, for example, and let's say they're really struggling to get electricians on site to advance the electrical work, and you're seeing that as a big gap, but you have reached out to a company that you believe you can bring in to maybe de-scope that from the EPC and say, look, we all agree you're struggling with this, let's do it. It doesn't break everything, right? And you own that right as an owner, and you can work with the EPC, because yes, they lose their 10% or 15 or 12% markup on that, but you would only do that if they're deficient on something, and work with them to come up with an alternative approach, and you don't break the whole thing. The other part of that is when you own the contingency, you can make the decisions that you think are necessary for acceleration, for expediting. If you want to spend $3 million to expedite a piece of equipment, the EPC is not going to be inspired to do that on your behalf without a change order. And even just the concept of the change order, saying that, you get into an argument of, well, wasn't this included in your contingency to do these things? And if you can own all that and be open book about the communication around that contingency, it just makes everything more collaborative. And that inherently, to me, is always the better way. And we see a lot better outcome on projects when collaboration is at the forefront.
So the magic really happens at that 30% design, right? So buzzwords, FEL2, 30%. So you're done with your optionality analysis. You've decided the basic layout. You decided on your P&ID. You've decided on key technology, your project size. What about innovation, right? So it's easy for somebody to say, well, I've used these vendors in the past, or I've used these technologies in the past. What if there's something cool out there, some other cool new approach that maybe you got to travel to Europe to go see one running? Maybe it's not the same application. Are investors so stuck on lump sum, fixed price, have the thing totally de-risked? I mean, how do we still innovate in this space and try newer approaches without scaring the investors off?
Yeah, I think it all comes down to size of project and who the investors are at the stage you're talking about, right? So if you're looking for BlackRock to come in with infra capital to put billions behind something, they are probably targeting, 8 to 12% returns on their capital. And therefore it has to be significantly de-risked to align with their cost of capital. If you're talking about the more private equity markets, where maybe they're looking for mid-teen returns, in order to get those types of returns, you have to take a little bit more risk. And so they can be the ones that take a little bit more technology risk or scale up risk. Often I wouldn't even call it binary technology risk, but maybe they'll be the ones to go from, okay, you've done a commercial demo plant, we'll take the risk from there to a bigger scale. And then you've got the venture markets, right? And they will do more of the investments into, the higher risk, and they're looking for, multiples of invested capital type return, not even percentage points type mentality, right? And so they will get you from that point where it's like, hey, there's something here, to the point where the private equity money can come in, and private equity money gets you to the point where infra money can come in. So they all play their role subsequently. And you kind of have to think of it as the 12 to 15% guys, the, 8 to 12% guys, and the multiple on investment capital guys. And where you're at in those life cycles really define, what kind of maturity you need at each one of the contract stages of each of those.